What up, everyone? This is James Patrick, Slam Academy. I've been an Ableton certified trainer since 2006, and I'm stoked to show off the Live 11 new features. Today we're going to cover the Redux. Let's drop the beat here and see what's up at this change up. So I like how that's sounding. That's sounding pretty cool. That sub bass especially is tight. You know, a really fun thing to do with sub bass, especially, this is pretty raw. I just have a little bass channel strip on here, nothing too crazy. That soloed sub bass. What that is, that's a mutable Platts module. It's a Eurorack module. In fact, that's what all this stuff is. A really common thing to do with sub bass, though, to help it cut through the mix, is to add a little digital distortion. Take a look at the new Redux. Bit reduction and sample reduction, or aliasing, this is really the mathematical device that allows us to employ digital distortion. And how this works, if you look at a waveform, like for instance our audio of our bass here, digital audio is technically just a 2D kind of vibration. And if you zoom in really, really close, you'll start to see dots when you get just really insanely close. See all those little dots? Each of those dots is a sample. Now, if your sample rate is 48K, for instance, you're going to have 48,000 of those samples in every second, every 1 second of audio. And then the height of the waveform is actually the bit depth. So the two-dimensional map here of a piece of digital audio is the bit depth, which is the height, and the frequency resolution left to right is the sample rate. Now, if I go back to my Redux, you'll maybe recognize sample rate reduction and bit depth reduction. These are the two knobs from the traditional Redux. But then below it, we have some additional knobs. We can add jitter and shaping to the bit reduction and the aliasing. But then we also have this nice little pre or post filter and some phase offset, like where we can flip the phase of the bit reduction and, of course, mix it in now too. Big problem with digital distortion is when you apply it, distortion in general, you can lose the bass. And the analog distortion devices like overdrive and saturator and glue compressor, they of course offer a dry-wet mix, but the Redux never did, and that was kind of bothersome. But let's listen to this now on that bass sound. You'll recognize the bit reduction and sample rate reduction, but then we'll play around with some of these new functions. I'm going to go ahead and loop this kind of wub zone up here. Let's stick with this section, Command L. Yeah. Let's look at that on the spectrum. You'll be able to see some new kind of 10K teeth come in, and the more bits the more aliasing I evoke, the slower here I reduce the rate. This is essentially like removing more and more of those tiny little dots. And when I get really, really low, you'll remember with the original Live 10 Redux, there was a softer hard mode. We start getting into the hard aliasing, which is just like insane. Let's bring this back up. And see, now I'm adding some new peaks. And if you wanted to get really classy about this, let's fold this up to clear out the shadow and hit play on that once. Now I can look at the shadow and I can see exactly the frequency I was aliasing the hardest, and I can look in the lower left of my spectrum and see which note that is. It's like an E7, which is cool because this bass line happens to be in the key of E. And so knowing that, I can essentially harmonize or not, depending on what I'm going for, or just use my ears. Obviously, I was just using my ears. It felt tasty there. And now I can confirm, damn, I was like 8 octaves above my fundamental, but it is in harmony truly. Isn't that sweet? Yummy. So now let's add a little jitter and see what that happens. We'll also apply some pre and post filter. Now this jitter effect kind of reminds me of the erosion's noise width. If you remember playing around with the erosion in previous versions of Live, you have a width control. Don't worry, we still have all that in Live 11, but now you can employ a little of that in the Redux, and that'll kind of smooth out the peak, so maybe it's not right on E anymore. It's just kind of getting smeared all over the place, kind of like some wide noise. That's kind of nice. And now let's say we want to remove a little bit of that off the top. You can go to this post filter and you can brighten it all the way up and you will be able to listen to me kind of roll it off. It's a pretty steep filter roll off, so you can already see it way up there on the top. Maybe just put it right up over the peak, so now I can see my noise and now I have it rolled off. Another really tasty thing you can do with this, let's zero this back out. If I go up to full rate, it won't be having any effect at all. And I can go to the pre-filter. Let's go ahead and tweak the pre-filter. That's almost accentuating the digital distortion because as you can see, my original sound is getting rolled off nice. It's got a nice kind of low pass filter roll off that's nice and subtle, but then now the digital distortion comes in after the filter. That really accentuates it. Yummy, huh? So yeah, just filtering it before or after the noise is insanely tasty. That's how that whole aliasing works. So this is aliasing. In other words, high frequency artifacts left behind when you remove samples from the word clock. In other words, the stream of samples every second. That's how aliasing works. Let's go ahead and turn that filter off and remove the jitter and crank the resolution all the way back up. So we're back up to our original sound. And now let's hear some bit reduction. Again, this will be familiar. We're removing the amplitude resolution of the recording now. It's kind of metallic almost. If I go any lower, it's going to just start sounding like Nintendo garbage. Yum. So now that we've really punctuated that by busting the bit depth just to nothing, basically, in other words, like compressing the sound, we can go ahead and shape it by, this is going to affect the tone of the noise. As you can hear probably, with more shape makes for sharper corners. In other words, more kind of brightness, or more of a kind of smooth rolled off noise. It's a little smoother around the edges as far as the waveform geometry. Now let's say we're just going completely to town on this. I mean, it's just like destroy the thing. You can go as hard as you want, and once you get it all dialed in, you can try flipping the phase. That's going to make for usually a common word described with offsetting the DC. In other words, flipping the DC, like taking the big peaks that are high and flipping them upside down. This is like a kind of phase reversal, and what this usually is associated with is kind of more of a hollow sound. Let's listen to that again. Now in this case, it's kind of detracting from the signal a little bit, because I just love those hella noise grits and nice and sharp. So now last but not least, like I was saying before, a common thing that you want to do when you're applying heavy amounts of distortion is you want to preserve the original integrity of the sound a little, especially in the low end. Because like if you ever try this even with like an overdrive pedal or a saturator, if you drive the heck out of it, you lose the bass and the body of the sound. So that's a real good argument for trying putting it in parallel. Let's go back and go to parallel here. Now we can mix it in. You can even see here by looking, my bass is peaking up. If I have this parallel, my bass is peaking way up here at like 0, right at 0. And as I bring this in, look at how my bass is peaking at -6. So the Redux actually took 6 dB of sub bass out of my track. That sucks. So let's go ahead and pull this back. We can still enjoy the tasty fragments up here in the overtone series, but we're still up here at like, you know, -2. We've only took a couple dB out. That is just yummy, huh? Let's go ahead and hit this harder. Hear that? Now we got our filter in there. New harmonics. can even see it right up here around 1.5K as I roll it off. That allows me to maybe even apply more noise. Oof. Yummy, huh? Oof. Let's stick with this nice 2 bits. Yeah, so that's the Redux, man. What a major update. I mean, I always love bit reduction, but I end up using the erosion effect like 99% of the time because it offers more subtle frequency control and shaping of the noise and stuff. Now with jitter, shape, DC shift, a built-in filter, and a dry-wet mix, we can actually achieve subtly different results than the erosion. It's not just like the same device with less controls. So again, James Patrick at Slam Academy, and I got to throw in real quick that Slam Academy is the very best place to not only get quick recipes for how to make great sounding music, but to actually deeply understand the nature of sound and the nature of what you're really sculpting here. I realize that all my students really don't just want to make a quick groove, but they want to create their own sound. And that's what we do at Slam Academy. And how we achieve that is by having 6 hours at least of every single week of interactive time in all of our online programs and making them more affordable than anywhere else. You can go to Slam for less than $100 a month and work with me and my fellow experts for 6 hours a week in our interactive high-res classroom. And we have more Ableton certified trainers than anywhere else. So we look forward to working with you. Let's create our own sound. And I'm happy to hear from you. My email address is jp@slamacademy.com. And looking forward to seeing you all on Live 11 soon.
Discover your own sound at America's leading digital audio academy, Slam Academy. An Ableton certified training center, Slam offers in-depth courses in sound design, mixing and mastering, DJing, and more in Minneapolis, Denver, and online. Only at www.slamacademy.com.